This is not a sponsored episode today, but we do have very kindly given to us some drift lure rods. We'll go through the different sizes because you may want to mix up and change the reels that you use. It's got that very distinctive orange there. We're on Hastings Pier today. I just thought I'd give them a little go off here. We're going to try a variety of different lures. You can see here we've got prawn lures, some of your basic shads as well. So we'll put these rods to the test along with a couple of reels that I'd recommend as well. So last summer we put it through its paces and we're not catching a bass here. Look at this. Would you believe it? 2 mackerel on the same lure. It does go to show that, you know, these sort of rods are good fun. You have a real good game with the fish with this, and it can still land something to a good size. So although I fish mostly on the south coast, you know, sometimes down in Devon, when you're looking at a lure rod, it is important to remember where you are in the country. If you're fishing off shallower, rockier beaches like this, you don't need a heavier lure rod or anything over 30 grams. And again, the length of the rod, we'll come on to the length of the rod, but you know, 9 foot's a bit long for me. I don't fish estuaries, I don't fish open beaches so much, but it's worth bearing in mind. So the idea with the free lining is you want a good flow of water here as the prawn drops down. You know, you're going to need a few test casts to know where you want to do it, but if I just drop that down, the theory being, of course, that the bass are out of the tide, hiding behind stanchions and pilings. Don't even know what the difference between pilings and stanchions are. So this is the Review-DRX1. The material here is quite firm, which I like. Sometimes this can be a bit spongy, but that is nice and tight. There's not much give in there, and the weight is lovely. It's like that prawn. You've got to be careful because if the prawn drops down past the stanchion, you can wrap around it. Just let that drop down. Yeah, so yeah, the balance is great. And that first sort of wobble on there, I'll show you, is kind of tippy. You see it about 3/4 of the way down. It's starting to waggle. And then it stiffens up to the butt. And I'm not going to use words like fast action. I think that can be a bit confusing. But you know, if there's a tippiness to it that gets firmer as it comes through the blank, that's going to help with the soft plastics and the smaller lures like this. We're almost drop shotting this. This will be the lightest I'm going to use it today. So I hope this gives a little bit of an indication here of the, not really the test curve, but how the rod bends. So with the 2 different versions there, you can see how the power sort of progresses through the blank. It's quite stiff towards the handle of the blank, which is what you want. People often talk about a fast action, ultra fast, extra fast action. It really means how tippy it is and how you can flick out those small soft plastic lures that are very light. So in terms of gram weighting on these rods, you'll notice a number there, and that's the sort of the ideal weight really that the rod casts. So you can cast a 30 gram lure on a 25 gram rod, but it's really designed that sweet spot between those 2 gram weights. And the more tippy, the more sort of fast action it is, the better for adding a little bit of energy into those soft plastics. And the reel seat is absolutely fine. This bit of trim here, it's always good to have something good there. When that rattles around, that can be quite annoying. Retaining clip here, which I never use. I just put it onto the rod eye. Probably shouldn't be doing that. So you can see a little bit of watercraft here, I suppose. You see down there the way the water's swirling round. I like the look of that, so I'm just going to try and use it again. You know, when you've got a good rod, you can feel when to release that prawn. Just want to put it into that. Perfect. And let that drop down. I'm going to bring it between those 2. The theory being bass early season are a little bit more lethargic. They're not smashing the lures yet. Let's just drop that one down. So I've paired this with a 2500 reel. We'll have a look at the other rod in a minute with a larger pen fixed ball, but I do like my Shimano's, you know, and depending on your budget, you know, if you stick with a Shimano, you can't go far wrong. This has got the Hagain gearing on it, this Nassi HG, and it's not fully sealed, but it very rarely gets any moisture in there at all. So it's just nice, pleasant to hold. I like that sort of angle here. Just generally, I mean, the handle is sort of a personal choice, isn't it? What we've got here from Drift is, yeah, it's good enough. What do you want? How much do you want from your handle? Like a bit of give here. They are Fuji rings. There are different levels of Fuji rings, remember. These are all Fuji rings on these rods we've got here. There is a difference between the types within the Fuji range as well. In the foreground here we've got our Drift lure rod. And then I'm just comparing that to this one here, which is the Skyline from Favourite. See, it's slightly more blued on that Skyline one, isn't it? So although they're Fuji rings, they are sort of different as well. And this one here coming into the foreground is from the Shimano Luna, which is 3 times as much. I mean, the rod costs 3 times as much as the Drift. Normally you'd pay a bit more and get a better ring, but I think Drifter have chosen wisely with these. The only thing I would say is they're not quite as rigid or as strong as the more expensive rod there. You see it's a little bit more flimsy, whereas it's a lot stiffer in that Skyline there. Just something, you know, you might want to be prepared for, but they are better than the old Favourite Cobalt there. There we go. I'm getting a bit too geeky now. Perfectly well rung. The whipping is consistent across all these rods. And you will get, a lot of people are worried that you don't get a leader line pass through there, but a well tied FG knot on 15-pound line, that should fly through there, no problems at all. And this is always a good mark of a rod. This needs to be super tight but easy to get off. Slightly different in the coloration there. I think that's because I've been using one of these rods. So as you're looking through different lure rods to buy, you'll probably see something crop up that says fast action, extra fast, hyper fast action. Think of a fast action as the tip of the rod and how it bends closest to the tip. That'll be a fast action rod. But a rod can do everything, you know, you can still have power and strength. So when you are choosing a lure rod, obviously the length of the rod is important. Now, I mix and match a little bit, but something like a 9-foot rod will give you an advantage. You know, here we're fishing in Rye Harbour, and you can even be sticking a float on there, and it will really help to have that extra length in the rod. Similarly, if you're going for out and out casting difference, you know, you're going to cast further with a 9-foot rod than an 8-foot rod. So that's worth bearing in mind. And for somewhere like here, you're going to find it, you know, we're fishing over obstructions here with a float today. You're going to have advantages with a longer rod. So, you know, before you buy any lure rod, doesn't have to be this one, but just consider that length really is important to your enjoyment of the fishing, particularly if you're only going to have one rod where you'll be fishing different conditions. Ideally you could pick 3 or 4 different sizes, couldn't you? But so pretty consistent throughout the range. And you do feel a fish. And if you're new to lure fishing, I do recommend braid for the bass with a fluorocarbon leader. That's where you've got to be careful lifting a bass up, even this big, off the tip, but these rods are performing quite well there. So only a small one, about 40 centimetres. So in terms of adding a bit of action or energy into lures, absolutely fine here with this 35 gram rod. You'll be moving the tip a little bit more. There is some advantage to having a lighter sub 30 gram for the soft plastics. You can really animate the lures with that. You know, little taps on the rod tip, little flicks. You've got a lot of control still. Oh, look at that little garf, and that is a little garfish. Look at that, beautiful. Obviously that's foul hooked, it hasn't gone for the lure. You can fish, you know, pretty much all day, cast, retrieve, and I feel like I can do that with this rod. You know, it's a 35 gram rod, but it's light enough and it's well balanced enough to keep casting. Just something to consider. You know, if you've got a 50 gram lure rod, like the bigger version, might be all right for some estuary fishing, float fishing even, and bigger lures. But this, you know, this thing, I could pick it up. You see some bird activity there, but they're not actually doing anything. There might have been something previously that have kept them in that area, so it's always say, don't we, on the channel, keep an eye on the birds. Nothing too exciting going on there. So we're trying to find a little bit of more flowing water, come to this part here, and then sometimes it is worth just like lifting the rod up, let it drop down, just to get a little bit more movement in that prawn. Sport for choice now for lure rods. This is the Veals website. Just having a little check through what you can get for around about 120 quid. It's quite a competitive market really. The favourite rods are always a favourite here on the Saltwater Angler channel, that's for sure. The X1s around about that price. There's also the Major Crafts on there somewhere. Saul Para, is it, the Major Craft one? It's the favourite X1. That's probably the biggest competitor to this rod if you're shopping around. And you've also got, you know, options from Penn as well and Shimano. So yeah, I mean, do have a look around. A lot of the power of that little cast there with that very light 5 gram lure is off the tip. So if you have got a tippy rod like this, that can really help your casting. And this rod has got it, yeah. And then the best link are these breakaway mini lure clips. Just small enough, light enough, definitely strong enough. Had big fish on those. Helps with the battery. fluorocarbon. You do have to be careful how you store them. They melt, so keep them with the same lures. I don't know why, maybe it's a different pH slightly and it starts melting, but keep them in the packet if you can. So again, that's not something I've always done. I've also got a couple of like little ragworm type lures like that. Very occasionally, I don't fish too many venues like this, but around mud and stuff like that, the bass will take something like that. Haven't had one for a couple of years on these, but they are handy just to have in the box, aren't they? Because if the bass are after little rag or rockworm, a few of those as well, little crayfish type lures adjusted for the sea, you know, squat lobster or a tiny lobster. Got those in different sizes, different ways of hooking those. And bigger ones as well. I'll put the details for these underneath. I just want you to have a look. So a little introduction to what you get for your money with these Drift-X rods. Do consider the sort of venues you fish and therefore the length of rod you want, and then the types of lures that you'll be using and getting the most out of. You might want to go under the 35 grams, and you might want to go a little bit lighter if you're fishing soft plastics. And if you are spending your hard-earned cash, you know, get a rod that you're happy with. Lengthwise and the weight as well. If you're using lots of little soft plastics, you don't want those bigger 45-50 gram rods. Get something around the 35, and that should accommodate a few soft plastics plus your bigger lures as well, and even metals, spinning for mackerel and things like that. You can do it all on that rod, even a bit of float fishing as well. So I hope that helps as we go into the summer season now for lure fishing. Stay tuned on the channel and do subscribe, because we've got more lure rod reviews coming. Plus we'll be landing a few more bass, I hope, on soft and hard plastics. All you need to do if you want to be into the draw to win this, or win one of these, a drift rod of your choice. Drift have kindly agreed to give one away. We'll chuck in some lures as well, and all you need to do for that is just write a comment underneath. This is a weighted shad that is meant to bounce along the bottom, so they've got the weight there, and it's just designed to be quite lethargic, so we'll give that a go.